Okay, anybody excited about being here today? You ready for our panelists? All right. I'm gonna have our panelists come on up. You guys make your way. And while these guys are making their way up here, let me just share with you, as a real estate agent, what I've learned over the years is that when we go out and meet with somebody about selling their home, they can meet with 3 different realtors and get 3 different opinions, right? It's the same way with doctors, isn't it? You can meet with 3 different doctors about the same issue and get 3 different opinions, yeah? And in a way, that's a good thing, and in a way, that can be a little bit confusing, yeah? Well, so today I have 2 medical doctors. I have a PhD doctor, and these are very smart people. And what I loved about the conversation that we had when we started preparing for this is that they all share very similar views on some things, but on other things, they're kind of like, okay, I'm not sure that I have the same opinion. And what do we call this series? You remember the Senior Living Truth Series, and what does that mean? It means we don't dance around the hard subjects, right? And so these guys are going to address some things today that you may not have, your regular doctor may not address with you, your regular healthcare people may not address with you. And I laughed about this because part of that reason that they don't address it is because they have, I think you told me this, Dr. Imes, you've said it to people so many times and they don't do it that you just kind of quit telling them, right? Sometimes. So today we're going to talk about it, we're going to share some truths, and my goal would be that you guys do something different when you leave here today. If you're not doing, is anybody here doing everything right? If you are, raise your hand. Everything right? You're doing everything right. That's impressive. We only have 1 person, 2 people in the room that are doing everything right, 3 people in the room doing everything right. Everybody else is going to make a change today. Isn't that exciting? All right, cool. Okay, so we're going to get started. Guys, Dr. Smith has been with us before. Dr. Imes is new to this group. He's not new to clinical practice here in Oklahoma City by any means. And Dr. Powers is new to this group, but I have to brag a little bit because she was highly recommended, no pressure, by this group back here. Raise your hand, UCO folks. Where are you so you know where they are? The UCO folks out in the kinesiology department told me about Dr. Powers and said she was the person to be here. So no pressure. If I'm going to be nervous, you have to be nervous. It worked? Good. All right, good. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to have them introduce themselves. I'm going to have them tell you a little bit about who they are and how they came to be here today. And then we're going to dive into some questions. Now, you all know that if you're new, you don't know, but if you aren't new, you know the drill. If you have questions, write them down. That's why we gave you a note sheet. Write them down. We want you to write your questions down as you have them, and then the last part of the program, we'll open it up for questions, and you guys will get to ask them whatever questions you have. And if we can answer them, we will. If we can't, we'll make a note and somebody will get back to you later. Does that sound fair? Say yes? Okay, wonderful. All right, are you ready? All right, number 1, tell us a little bit about yourself, your education, and why you're interested in this subject.
Okay, is this on?
It is on.
It doesn't have an on-off,
No.
so that's wonderful. Hello, everyone, and thank you, Nikki, for inviting me to be here. And of course, thank you, Jerry, for recommending me to be here. I hope I can live up to your expectations.
Oops, sorry.
I am Melissa Powers. I am a professor in the Dr. Virginia Peters Department of Kinesiology and Health Studies at the University of Central Oklahoma. I've been at UCO for 17 years. My background is exercise science. That's what I do, is help people be physically active. So I was a student of exercise science in the 90s, and it was in the 90s that we started to understand the importance of physical activity as we were aging. And I was fascinated by that because we knew a lot about it, but we weren't putting it into practice very well yet. So we knew we should be physically active as we get older, but there weren't a lot of people doing it yet or continuing as they got older. So that's what attracted me to the field initially. What I've learned over the years is now we're doing a better job of getting the message out, but we're not doing a great job of helping people be physically active. In fact, I think this will be a theme today because we were just talking about it at our table. Compliance is a real problem, right?
Does that mean people doing it?
Yeah, we know what we need to do, actually doing it is a problem. And so a few years ago, I started to shift my focus from really looking at the research and what works best to how do we get people to be physically active. So looking at those things like behavior change, individuality, how do we help people be physically active?
And we're going to get into some specifics on that today.
Yeah. So a few other things that I do at UCO, just real quickly. I also serve as the chair of our institutional review board. That keeps my finger in research a bit on campus. I'm our campus labyrinth coordinator, so that keeps me in mindfulness and moving for mindfulness a bit. I don't know if that'll come up today, but if not, I'd be happy to talk to you about it afterwards. I do have some information about labyrinths with me, if you're interested in that and want to know more.
Over at your table, right?
I have a table over here, absolutely. I also serve as UCO's age-friendly champion. This is probably the first big announcement of this, but UCO is the first university in the state of Oklahoma to become an age-friendly university. And what that means is that we want to focus on our campus on welcoming people of all ages in our programs, in our employment, in our anything we do on campus.
Can we, first of all, just appreciate them for that? That's a big deal. You may not realize it's a big deal. When you look around the country at the aging initiatives and the universities, they're one of a few that are doing that.
We are one of a few. It is a growing number.
Right.
It is growing. Thankfully, it's growing, but
You're setting the bar.
We are.
Yeah.
We are trying to anyway. We're learning too, right?
Sure.
I mean, by being an age-friendly university, it doesn't mean that we do it all right. I'm not saying that, and we are not saying that, but we're trying. Is what that means.
We're getting there.
Yeah. And then the last thing I wanted to share with you that I've done in my time at UCO, and it's probably the thing I'm most proud of, is in 2016, I established the Center for Active Living and Learning, otherwise known as CALL. CALL is a center that provides, at this point, 30-plus weekly exercise classes in the Oklahoma City metro area, from Guthrie to Piedmont, Oklahoma City, Midwest City, Norman, all over. I have some information about that if you're interested. These classes are low-cost, high-quality programs, primarily for people 60 and older. I am no longer the director of CALL. Two of my colleagues, Dr. Jackie Olson and Dr. Larissa Boyd, have taken over the day-to-day operations and are taking it to new levels, which I'm thankful for, but they let me stay involved a little bit with that. One more thing about CALL and then I'll be done. CALL is also a learning laboratory for our students. So not only do we provide those high-quality programs, our students get to learn their skills in those programs. All the classes are student-led. And this semester alone, we have over 100 students from our classes who have experiences in those classes where some of them get to meet an older person for the first time.
Isn't that wild?
It's a life-changing experience for them. Life-changing experience. I can tell from their reflections. It changed their perspective. And then others are there to learn how to lead the class as well. So it's a learning laboratory for us.
Awesome.
Thank you for letting me
All
share
right,
everything.
aren't we glad to have her? Right, I told you we had smart people here. And Dr. Imes, you're already on. You should be on. Yeah, they manage all that for us here, which is awesome. Yep. Oh, really? Oh, wow, Jim. Thank you. You know what? When you have a professional photographer in the room and you ask them to take really good pictures, everything matters. Yes, you can tell your wife we took care of that for you. All right, cool. All right, go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about you and why you're interested in this topic.
Well, I'm interested in the topic because I'm getting old. But I'm Dr. Norman Imes. I, believe it or not, graduated from medical school a long time ago. It's been probably 54 years ago now. So I graduated from medical school in 1970.
Hold that mic a little closer, Dr. Imes.
So,
Hold that a little closer. Hold the mic a little closer.
a little closer. All right. I had my training in internal medicine primarily, and then after internal medicine, I specialized in pulmonary disease and critical care medicine. During my years when I was in pulmonary training, you may find this hard to believe, there's no such disease as sleep apnea. There's not one article in the English literature about sleep apnea. But I noticed pretty quickly, just going around at night, hey, there are people who are not breathing. Did y'all ever notice that? And they don't look very good. And so I found a PhD who had some of the technology I needed, and we started doing sleep research while I was in training in pulmonaries. He made a career out of it, one of the best researchers in sleep medicine history. He was a PhD, he published a lot of papers, like 1,200 of them. I published some with him, but eventually I finished my training, went into pulmonary critical care medicine. So I was primarily a medical director in a tertiary hospital for 30 years. Now, it's fate would have it, one of the interesting things that happened in that hospital, which is Integris, is Nazi Zudi was there, and he wanted to start transplants. So I got an opportunity to be the pulmonologist on the transplant team for heart transplants, heart lung transplants, and then finally I started the lung transplant program there in 1990. So practice was a lot of fun, a lot of innovative things, a lot of creative things that we did over the years. In 2006, I gave that up and went into sleep medicine. Of course, I had a long history of that, dating back longer than anybody in the world, actually. And so I have done sleep medicine since that time, which compared to sleep medicine, comparing to sleep medicine to critical care medicine, it's pretty remedial. Sleep medicine is not nearly as much fun. So I get sidetracked on other things, such as this kind of quest to find some way to make myself live longer and live healthier. I think a lot of us are not particularly afraid of dying, we just don't want to be sick on the way. And that's kind of the way I am. And so I wasn't particularly good over the years I practiced, like a lot of people. And so about 1970, I got really serious about it and have developed a lifestyle, everything, including diet and medication, supplements, and so on, get my health under good control. And so a lot of things that you get faced with every day. It just has to be part of what you do. I keep emphasizing to my patients, this has to be a habit. This has to be something that you do it every day. There's no days off. You've got to adhere to the diet. You've got to adhere to your medication list. You've got to adhere to your exercise program. You've got to get good sleep. Good sleep is very important. If you don't sleep well, nothing else will work very well.
So back to one thing you said, compliance. We're back to compliance, aren't we?
There's compliance.
Yeah. Okay, so hold that thought 1 second, and I'm gonna have Dr. Smith introduce himself, and then, but before we do, real quick, you need to hear something because I like to be completely transparent. The way I met Dr. Imes is Chris and I actually go to him for our sleep health, and we were introduced to him by Chris's dad, who went to him. And I'm gonna just brag for 1 second because. When you see Dr. Imes, he is so bored with sleep medicine, I think, because it is so remedial to him, as you put it, that what he does is when he tells you to do something and you ask him why, he then sends you papers on why. And he'll email, if you want to. I mean, obviously, I'm sure he knows that Chris and I are very learning-based, and we'll say, well, we don't understand why this or that, and he will say, well, there's research on it. Would you like to see it? Yes, please. And then you'll receive an email in about 10 p.m. at night. It'll come through, and after he's been at the clinic all day, and then he sends you articles that you can read. I will tell you, I don't know of another doctor who does that. Most of the doctors I go to, I say, why should I do that? And they go, because I said so. And I just do it, right? So I'm only saying this to you, for those of you who are in the room who like to have reasons why. That's one of the things you might want to talk to your physician about, is show me the research. And if they aren't willing to show you the research, then you may have to question whether or not they actually even know if there's research. That's just my little side thing. No offense to doctors, you guys are the exception to the rule. Dr. Smith, I know, because he's sat on a few panels of ours and comes highly recommended, teaches all over the city on various topics. Dr. Smith, go ahead and tell them a little about your background and why you're interested.
Yeah, thank you, Nikki, and it's a pleasure to be here this morning. And I'm Richard Vertrees Smith. I'm an MD physician. I graduated from college in Westminster College, Fulton, Missouri, although I'm a lifelong Oklahoman. I graduated from the University of Oklahoma School of Medicine, went on to have some postgraduate training in internal medicine and general surgery, and then after serving 2 years in the Air Force during our Vietnam issue, came back and completed a residency in neurological surgery and then progressed to board certification in neurological surgery. I practiced neurosurgery here in Oklahoma City for 30 years, and after that became medical director of the Mercy Neuroscience Institute for the next 17 years. And I still work for Mercy as the physician liaison to the Mercy Health Foundation. So I'm still active. I still see patients once a week at Crossings Clinic. This church's community outreach clinic for the medically underserved. And so it's a real blessing to have that opportunity. So I do that as well. My wife Jan and I have been married for 60 years. We have 3 sons, 7 grandchildren, and that pretty well covers who I am and what I do.
It covers about this much of who you are and what you do.
Well, anyway, I think what you need to do is hear from us today.
Yeah, that's
and,
right.
that's the main thing.
I
So
appreciate
thank
that. Yeah. So guys, again, one of the reasons I really appreciate these guys is that they're here to speak to you, not at you. Don't you appreciate that? To us and not at us. Thank you for that. Okay, so let's start talking about, what is aging really? How do you approach it? What makes your philosophy about aging what it is? But let's talk about aging. I'm going to go to the slide that Dr. Smith gave me on physical aging. Now, what you're going to notice is your handout may have something slightly different, so just so you know, it's the same information, it's formatted differently. Dr. Imes gave me some notes I put in your handout, and Dr. Smith gave me some notes that are on the slide. So, Dr. Smith, I'll have you start. Talk about what is physical aging.
Thank you. Yeah. I was saying earlier, if I stand up, I talk a lot better. Somehow, walking and brain engagement works for me. So I'm going to try to do this sitting down.
It's up to you. I'll give you the luxury of either one.
I'm pretty well sunburned, so this looks good. So I usually start with Genesis 6:3. In that it says that they are mortal. In the future, they'll have 120 years. And we know that that's probably right now the maximum cell life in our bodies. And the thing that I really emphasize that and Dr. Powers can certainly elaborate on this, but at about age 15 to 30, that's when we are our best. We're best physically, our brain works the best, we have the best reserve energy, we can tolerate an awful lot. But after about age 25 to 30, we begin to lose ground, and we don't tolerate stress very well as well. And the more we get towards 40s, 50s, 60s, and on up, our aging process becomes a little more intense, and our body's a little more fragile. We don't like change, we don't like temperatures get too hot, too cold, and things that we don't tolerate very well. So that's the way I approach aging.
Wow, that's kind of depressing in a way.
No,
right? 30 was our pinnacle, right?
We deteriorate to some degree, but we have wisdom. We don't have to go back and learn things that we learned in pre-K through high school, college, or whatever. So we have wisdom, and that's the important thing.
There's the silver lining, right? There's the silver lining. Yep. Dr. Imes, I might ask you to just elaborate slightly there on what he talked about in terms of the physical aging process. You mentioned that we break down in multiple areas, and without getting too technical, talk about kind of what those areas are that you see in the aging research that they're trying to now maybe even reverse, like how that happens.
Yeah, the question has come up, what can you do about this aging process? Is it inevitable? Does that mean that you have to look at the clock and you tell how old you are? Well, it turns out, I think each of us intrinsically knows this, everybody's different. People age at different rates. So there's 2 things that are going on. There's a genetic background of aging, which is determined when we're born by our inheritance. And so people do age genetically at different speeds. So about half of how long you live will be determined by your genetics. The other half will be determined by your lifestyle. Are you going to do the things that you kind of know that you should be doing? You're going to eat right, exercise, take your medications, keep your blood pressure under control, keep your lipids under control. All the things that you know you should do. If you do those things, you can modify the other half, and you can live longer. It brings up a lot of issues. The government, when they put together Social Security, for example, wants you to live to be 65. Well, our life expectancy did creep up to about 80, a little bit less for men, and now it's going backwards. for the last 2.5 years, life expectancy of men has gone from about 79.5 years down to 76 years.
So are you telling me they're trying to kill us?
Well, we're killing ourselves. We're killing ourselves. And and you can sit back and you can blame it on the COVID virus. You can blame it on lots of things. How many people died from fentanyl? But frankly, it's mostly just down to lifestyle. If you do the things you're supposed to do, you can live longer and live better. So we're not talking about living longer so you can be unhealthy. What we're talking about is living longer so you can be healthy, and so-called health span. How many years can you live without having physical, mental, health issues so that you have a healthy lifespan? So that's really the key. When you look at people who live to be 100 years old, they don't consume a lot of healthcare resources. Everybody thinks, well, you live a long time, you're going to break the bank at Medicare. That's not true. These people live to be 100 because they're not sick. They're genetically endowed. They've done things in life that didn't adversely affect them from an aging standpoint. So they live longer, and they're not unhealthy. They're healthy. And so when they do tend to die at 100, 105, 110, they tend to die relatively quickly. So they don't spend a lot of money on health care. So anyway.
Yeah, so that brings up a great point, and I may transition over to Dr. Smith about the superagers, right?
That's right. Superagers is a term that's been recently in the literature for the past 2 or 3, 4 years. And that superagers is a group of individuals in their 80s. They have memory and physical activities about like a 60-year-old, maybe a little younger than that. So as Dr. Imes is saying, that has to do with our genetics, certainly, but it also has to do with our activities of daily living, our lifestyle, our diet, our blood pressure, our blood sugars, all kinds of things go into that. So a superager has less brain shrinkage. We all have our brains shrink a little bit as we age, and in our 80s it becomes more profound. These are individuals that maintain a purposeful lifestyle, purposeful activities of daily living. A lot's been talked about by the Surgeon General about loneliness and how devastating that is for people. So these individuals they maintain their social activities, their relationships. They don't consume much alcohol, certainly no tobacco. They've maintained a degree of spiritual activity, religious activity. That's an important part of the way we're put together. They maintain reading activity. They actually read things besides watch TV. They get adequate sleep, as Dr. Imes is saying. If you can't get adequate sleep, your brain doesn't work well. Muscles don't work well. Nothing does. Maintain hearing. We say, oh, I don't need hearing aids. What did you say? I can't understand you. As we age, we lose high-frequency speech discrimination. So younger people talk fast and we can't hear them and can't understand them. So get some hearing aids. That's important. There's some things that I'm sure Dr. Powers can do called the up and down test. How long does it take you to get out of a chair, walk 30 feet, turn around, come back 30 feet, turn around and sit down? You need to be able to do that in about 10 seconds. If you don't, that's not a good sign. You need to do what Dr. Powers is advocating here. Anyway, finger tap, that takes some special equipment. Maintaining some form of exercise. Many of us get so much arthritic change in our spines and joints, hips and knees, it's very difficult to exercise, but you can walk. You can do water aerobics, you can do all kinds of non-weight bearing things, sitting down, lifting weights, that kind of thing. These are individuals without depression and anxiety. And again, the social contacts, all the things that you do to maintain your interest and activities, volunteering, whatever it is, that helps your depression and anxiety. And diet, it's huge, as Dr. Imes is saying. If we can do plant-based 80% of the time, and fish, chicken, white meat, that kind of thing, the other 20% of the time, your LDL is going to drop. Your blood pressure will go down, your blood sugar will be more manageable. But we do love our cheeseburgers, and they'll hurt you really bad.
Well, because mainly I'm finding people will tell you it's easier to go get a hamburger at Johnny's than it is to go do chicken or fish or plant-based diet. So
and we can see the effects of that in our younger people. Lots of hardening of the arteries, atherosclerotic heart disease in their 30s. We see young people dying from an acute heart attack. Why is that? They have arteries that are totally clogged with lipids, low density lipoprotein, LDL. So they will die early. We see that because all the young people have grown up going to McDonald's, and it's hurt their metabolism and their lipid management. Anyway, I don't. The list is up there.
And and we're going to provide them with that list as well.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And one last thing, statin drugs, and Dr. Imes can probably address that. But in our stroke program, if we discharge somebody out of the hospital not on a statin, we get a demotion from the hospital.
What does that mean? You get a demotion?
Statins are so important for prevention of stroke and heart disease that is part of our protocol at the Comprehensive Stroke Center that everybody that comes in has to go out on the statin drug. That keeps your LDL deposits in your arteries in your brain, neck, and heart from rupturing as much and causing a clot and causing heart attack or stroke.
So they're basically saying that this is so necessary that if you don't do it as a hospital, you're going to suffer some consequences of that.
It will certainly influence the quality of life and reduce the chance of a vascular heart attack or stroke.
Okay, so I have so many questions about that, but I can't do it today. So I'm going to come back to that because I have a lot of questions about the statin stuff. So hold that thought. We may get to it at the end.
It can be controversial.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's what I was going to say.
I feel very strongly about it.
And you've been doing a lot of speaking on this, so I trust that. And the reason I say I have so many questions is a whole different issue. Okay, so I'm going to come back to Dr. Powers. And the reason is because I know you see a range of people, not just different ages of people, but different stages of life, right? Some people who've had illnesses or who have disabilities of some sort. When you think about chronological age versus biological age, what are you teaching now? What is it that you all are teaching people out there that are going to be working with people? Should they look at chronological age or should they be looking at stage of life? What is it that you're teaching them to look at as it relates to serving people say over age 60?
Thank you for that question. I'm happy to answer that.
I bet you are.
Age is just a number. It is considered an empty variable. Chronological age tells us very little about a person other than the number of years they've been here on earth. Because what we know is as we get older, we are all exposed to different things. We make different choices throughout our lives. And so the older we get, the more diverse we are in our physical abilities. So much so that you might have someone like Ernestine Shepherd, which we've talked about, who is now 85, and she is the oldest competing bodybuilder. And we don't have a picture of her, but if you want to Google her, oh my gosh, she looks amazing. She is amazing. Or someone like Dan Little. I don't know if you guys have heard about Dan Little. He's an Oklahoman who last year at 80, he completed the World Marathon Challenge. He ran 7 marathons in 7 days on 7 continents. That was the second time he had done that. He did it first in his 70s and he wanted to do it again at 80 to show that he could do it. Or you might have an 80-year-old, right, that can't get up out of a chair. So as we age, we are all on a different trajectory. And so you can't really know someone by their age. And so the way I teach this is that you have to get to know the person you're working with. There are certainly some recommendations for physical activity that we give for people, all people, or as we get older, resistance training, balance training, maintaining your walking regimen, those kind of things, important for all of us. But you can't really know a person from their age, so you have to get to know your client. You have to know their past history, their history with physical activity, their health history, medical conditions, illnesses. What are they interested in? Because the best exercise for you is the one that you will do. And I can tell you what I think you should do, but if you won't do it, it does you no good. So I need to ask you, what do you want to do? What do you enjoy doing? What are you likely to keep doing? And so absolutely, we should look at the person, the individual in front of us, and never their age.
Thank you for that. You know, it's always interesting, and I want to just recap a couple of things that they've said that I feel like need to be resaid. One is the genetics versus the environment, right? I think you said 20% genetics, 50% genetics, okay, and then the rest environment. When I went to a cardiologist for the first time, I was 21 years old. I had just had my son, Caleb, and my mom had passed away at age 31 of a heart attack. And I was now a mom, and I was terrified. And so I went to see a cardiologist, and it was Dr. Potts, actually, at Mercy. He was my mom's physician as well. And I went through this whole battery of tests, and when we finished, he said to me, "Young lady," and I appreciated that because he was my senior, and he said, just because your mom died at 31 doesn't mean you will. You are a mixture of your mom and dad, number one. You're not all your mom, you're not all your dad, and you have the ability to do things differently than your mom did. And now I looked at him and I said, well, I don't really know what that means. She was 120 pounds, she was an athlete. And he said, did she smoke? I said, yes. He said, was she on birth control pills? I said, yes. He said, there's a lethal combination that we now know about. And he said, so I highly recommend that you don't smoke. Well, guess what I've never done? Smoked. But he did a great job, right? Like of educating me on what I needed to focus on and what not to focus on. And that brings me to one more question for Dr. Powers before I move on. And that is mindset. I know that we were going to talk about that later in our talk. But you mentioned something that was so powerful to me the other day on, don't panic, you'll know the answer. On mindset, how we view aging makes a difference, yes?
Yes, absolutely.
Talk about that.
So most of this work has been done by Becca Levy, who is from the Yale School of Public Health. And she recently published a book, it's really good if you're interested in it. It's called Breaking the Aging Code, How Your Beliefs About Aging Determine How Long and How Well You Will Live. And what she and her research group has found is that the most important thing for being happy and healthy as we get older is having a positive view of aging. So if we have a negative view of aging, and if we think as we get older we're to get weak, slow, and be in pain, then those things are going to happen to us. And we're more likely to have chronic conditions and die early. If we have a positive view of aging, recognizing that there are challenges as we get older. I do not want you to think that I don't think there are challenges. Absolutely. But if we have a positive view of aging and we stay engaged and we have that purpose and we make healthy choices, then we tend to live longer and healthier lives. And even controlling for those lifestyle factors like diet and exercise, managing stress, sleep, people who have a positive view of aging live 7.5 years longer than people who don't have a positive view of aging. So it's very powerful how we view ourselves as we get older.
Interesting, right? So that was kind of what you guys alluded to when you first started, which was part of the reason that you changed your habits was to improve your life. It's interesting, I was going to say this earlier, Dr. Imes, I looked for a picture of him to put on the slide when I was looking online, and Danielle and I couldn't come up with a picture of you. You know why? Because you were about, I don't know, I'm going to guess 30, 40, 50 pounds heavier in almost every picture, 60 pounds heavier in all the online pictures. How long has it been since you lost weight and got healthy?
I've done it over about the last 7 years.
How many?
About the last 7 years.
About the last 7 years, yeah. So this wasn't a lifestyle that you adopted as a young physician. This was something you adopted in what most people would consider retirement age.
Well, I'd always been interested in it. I did the right thing and live longer.
Interested in it.
But you did. I lifted weights, and when you're a weightlifter, you understand this. It's a psychological problem.
Yeah.
You want to lift more and more weight. Well, you got to have more and more muscle to lift more and more. If you want to lift 300 pounds, you've got to have a certain amount of muscle mass. finally had to give up that idea that I was going to be able to bench 300 pounds when I'm 80 years old. That is not important. So it was more important to get my weight down. It was clear that I was starting to get metabolic syndrome problems, blood sugars going up, blood pressure's going up, getting a little sleep apnea. So how do you change that? And this is true of so many of my patients in sleep medicine. You got to get your weight down. That is just critical. And I don't mean, I want to lose 15 pounds. I'm talking about getting your weight down to a BMI, preferably around 25, 26. I mean, sometimes even recommend lower than that. I don't like that. I think 25 or 26 people feel better. But you do have to get that weight down. That's so important across the board, because in our society, so many people are overweight. When I started doing sleep medicine in 1974, 10% of Oklahomans had a BMI of over 30. Now it's 50%. So huge difference in body weight, BMI, and our patient population. Well, of course, that's had all healthcare consequences, as you can imagine. So we had, part of what we've had to do is we've had to develop, biometrics. We had to develop ways in which we could do predictive medicine, and that's kind of where statins come from. Okay, if you have this profile, either a profile medically and physically, or a profile in your lab work, we therefore give people certain medicines, but it's based on biomarkers. There's a lot of different kinds of biomarkers. Got to be a very sophisticated issue now. We'll talk about aging now.
Let's do it.
Okay. So there's such a concept as biologic age, which is really totally independent of what your chronologic age is. Your chronologic age is how many calendar years do you have. Your biologic age is a measure of your health. It really doesn't have anything to do with your chronologic age. So you can have somebody who's 20 years old who has cystic fibrosis. He's got a terrible biologic age. So it doesn't have that to the time. But the way you measure this is you can do it sometimes just by what we call a frailty index. What does the patient look like? How physically active are they? What can they do? What's your strength? What's your endurance? You can measure those things in the clinic, and you can. They're a little more tedious when you try to apply those to widespread populations, for example. But a blood test or a buccal smear, they can look at the products of both your genetics and also the products of your environment, what that's done to your aging process. And so there's a couple of different techniques. The most common one we see is methylation of DNA. From the day you're born until the day you die, every day your genetics expression changes. So if you've got twins, after day one, they're not the same. And the further they are apart from each other, the more difference there is. And that's because they're exposed to different things. These changes very quickly, changes within hours. There was a study published about 5 or 6 years ago where they did a buccal smear, and they could tell you how many hours you slept last night. So that's how quick it can change. So it changes your expression of your genes just in a matter of hours. If I, for example, take a young person, say a 20-year-old man, and I have him sleep deprived for 4 hours, the next day he eats more food and he eats Twinkies. So it changes very quickly. So you get a culmination of this when you do these biogenetic markers. And you can then compare that to a normal population. So you got to have thousands of people that enter into these studies where you get your normals. Then you can kind of come up with an idea of how biologically old somebody is. So if they could be older or they could be younger than their chronologic age.
As compared to the general population, right?
General population.
And so, okay, so let's assume, I'm going to play a hypothetical, and you guys can bounce off of each other on this if you'd like, but let's say I do one of those tests, and I want to know what my biologic age is, and you said, I think one of you told me that they can also test different organs and tell me if my biologic age of my heart might be different than the age of my lungs, etc., yes? Okay, so based on that knowledge and that test, now the question becomes, what do I do about that? how do you treat someone, let's say that a patient comes in and they have a biologic age, chronological age of 53, but their heart or lungs is biologically 70 or 80 or 90?
Well, it gives you a chance to focus on the organ aspect, but also you do the things we're talking about today. And so you change your lifestyle, get your weight down, get your laboratory work treated, cholesterol under control, blood sugar under control, and so on. Do the exercise, all the things we're talking about today. If you do those, then you start to stabilize that biologic age. And it's reproducible. So to be a good marker that is useful medically, it's got to be reproducible. So over a period of time, if you check it, you can actually track your progress. What she's talking about is recently there's been a marketing of it, a little bit more sophisticated type of biologic age. It's not just your methylization of your DNA. They're also looking at the proteins and the secretions of the different organs, your lungs, your kidneys, your liver, your heart. All these different organs put out different substances into your bloodstream. There are literally tens of thousands of different proteins and markers that are circulating in your body. And so by looking at these profiles, you can tell what the age of somebody's lungs is, or their liver, or their kidneys. So your limiting factor is the oldest organ you have. If you've got a 20-year-old body and an 80-year-old brain, your 80-year-old brain is going to be your limiting factor. So, but it doesn't allow you to focus on the parts of the body, particularly that need some assistance. Try to do everything we can to maximize the function of that organ.
Perfect. Let's, Dr. Smith, do you want to add to that conversation?
Sure, I think that's one of the more exciting things that Dr. Himes has mentioned on genomic medicine or precision medicine, that we're just getting into that. I think in the future, pretty far into the distant future, we'll go to the doctor and we'll get a buccal smear, just a little swab inside. It will give our DNA signature. The DNA, that's who we are. There are 20,000 genes that make up who we are. There are billions of combinations of the code that goes into those genes to create who we are. And it produces all these proteins. Everything in our body is protein, everything. So that's the future. Get our DNA signature, look at that signature, see what we're prone to have at a young person. How can we edit that gene in the future to reverse or prevent the disease? Diabetes, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, other genetic inherited diseases. All kinds of things will be available. But getting back to the more practical side, and when patients ask me, well, doctor, I need to lose weight, what should I do? I say, it's really simple. If the food is look at the food, look at the menu, wherever you're eating, and you think to yourself, has that food ever had a face or a mother? A face or a mother? Simple. In other words, animal protein, lots of animal protein, no plant-based, in other words, a plant-based diet. If you have a plant-based diet, you do that easily. Once you convert to that diet, at least 80% of the time, you can't go back to your favorite T-bone steak, filet, whatever it is that you eat, a bowl of chili. You can't do it. It'll make you very ill. So, plant-based diet. Well, where do you find information on that? There's a couple of things. Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn from the Cleveland Clinic has published a lot. And the book is How to Prevent and Reverse Heart Disease. It can be applied to stroke as well. Dr. Colin Campbell, called the China Project, or China, I think that's it. Anyway, studied the Chinese and why one group of Chinese in their country had bad heart disease and stroke, and another didn't. They didn't have animal protein in that part of the country. World War II in Norway, the Germans took all of the protein, their chickens, their cattle, everything, took it away. They only had plants to eat. The incidence of heart disease and stroke went down precipitously until they got their animals back and went back up after 1945. So there's real truth in that, but it's very difficult. We talked about compliance. If out of this audience, if one person chose to do plant-based diet, I would be impressed.
Okay, so hang on. I have fun news for you. Steve Mangus, where are you? Stand up. All right, Steve and Mary Mangus right there. The last time you talked about this, those two took your challenge, and how did it work out, guys?
We're much healthier inside. We're still working on that.
We lost, this was 2019, August of
2019.
And we heard Dr. Smith speak.
Yeah.
I ruminated on that for a few days, and I came home and Mary about fell over and said, I think we need to do this. And I weighed about 265 pounds at the time.
Might speak a little louder.
I'm going to repeat it. Yeah, he weighed 265 at the time.
Yeah, I weigh a whole lot less now.
A whole lot less now.
And we have,
Yeah.
we are plant-based, no dairy, no cheese.
And let me ask you this, Steve, so that I can repeat it for the group. Did you have your labs done, and have they improved?
Yes.
All right, can we give them a hand?
Almost diabetic at the time, and I went down to A1C of 5.6 within about 6 to 9 months.
Within 6 to 9 months, you weren't at risk of being diabetic. Oh my gosh. Okay, so
One prescription, and that's for my thyroid, and that's it.
you guys, I'm telling you, I know you said compliance is the biggest problem. Okay, so that 2019 event that we had, Dr. Smith, I bet we had about 100 people in the room. It was at Francis Tuttle Votech. And we had at least 2. So there we go. We had at least 2%. That's something.
Bottom line is we want a rectangular survival curve. We want to do great, live to 100, then the next day we're gone.
Yeah,
That's
that's
it.
right.
Rectangular, no slopes.
Well, I'm shooting for 120. 120 is my goal. I'm just saying. We got to raise the bar a little.
Genesis 6:3.
That's what I'm saying. Okay, Genesis 6:3. Okay, so let's talk about other practical things. That was diet. Let's talk about supplements, and then we're going to talk about exercise, and then we're going to open it up to questions. So hold your thoughts. So spend a couple of seconds or minutes rather talking about supplements as it relates to the supplements that make sense versus the supplements that may not, that we see on nighttime TV kind of thing. You're it.
Okay, I put a couple of handouts over there on the table, and one of them is entitled The 12 Hallmarks of Aging. So aging is not one process. We got down that rabbit hole very quickly 50 years ago. We thought, oh, the answer to this is it's reactive oxygen species. So we control the oxidation problem that's abnormal in our bodies with antioxidants, and we're going to live a long time. That's the answer. Well, about 10 years later, then we discovered telomeres. Telomeres are strands of DNA on the end of your chromosomes, which protect them. But it turns out that the strands of DNA on the end of your chromosome, the telomeres, they're directly related to how many times a cell divides. And they're also related to your habits. If you smoke, they're shorter. If you live a good lifestyle, they tend to be longer. Healthy people have longer telomeres. And so then we correlated that, and we found out that they got shorter as you got older, just because cells divide. A little bit gets chopped off each time. So the theory was that your cells could divide about 55 times, and they stopped. And of course, when they stop, that's not good, because then they become so-called senescent cells. They're no longer healthy cells. But a lot of these things we're discovering, these different supplements, they may actually elongate the telomeres once again. They may actually turn on the processes so that you can overcome that halting in your cell division. Because obviously when your cells quit working, they put out other substances that may damage the whole body. It's not just confined to that one cell. So you get actually a systemic effect from these older cells that no longer work, so-called zombie cells, believe it or not. So that's the name they put on it, but they are injurious to the whole body. Now, it turns out even that was too simplistic. So we have now up to 12 different things that are going on in the aging process. So I look at supplements. Supplements are just dietary supplements. They're the same thing we're talking about with the diet, except put in a pill. They won't work if you don't do the rest of it. So you have to, it's everything in the whole program, the exercise, the sleep, everything we're talking about so far. You got to do that, and then the supplements may help to stabilize or maybe even reverse aging. There is some data out there now by using this biologic aging measurement technique that you can actually reverse the aging process. So it's independent of the chronological age. This is, you do a test, you put people on supplements in a controlled situation, repeat the test, and you show that they actually got biologically younger.
Okay, hang on, you said one key thing that I want to repeat. In a controlled environment. Because that has to do with their eating and their sleep and their exercise and all those things, right?
Absolutely. It's a whole program they put them on, plus the supplements. And it's the exercise, the sleep, the things that we already talked about. And then in addition, like I say, they give a supplement and we check their biologic age. So we know that it does have potential to work. But like I say, I think it would be foolish to think they're going to work in a vacuum. You can't just go out and buy one. Now, when you look at that list of 12 different things that are part of the aging process, you don't want to check 12 different supplements. So I put a list of the ones I think are, in my opinion, the most important. All these things you hear are not scientifically proven. It's one of the things you have to understand about this kind of medicine is there's no funding for the research. So the fundamental research in the laboratories is to a large degree funded by private individuals. They're rich people who want to live longer. The Saudis just started $1 billion laboratory for anti-aging last summer. They got a bunch of sheiks who want to live longer.
So that's where that research coming from.
So it's good research. I mean, I'm not belittling the research. It's actually high quality research because everybody else in that industry is very critical. They put out something that's BS. They pick up on it quickly and they call you on it. So it's very good, high quality research. But almost none of it is publicly funded. The NIH does not consider aging a disease. It is universally funded.
They're working on that, though. They're working on it. Not the NIH, but scientists, yeah.
Yeah, well, we're working on it, but it's not funded by the NIH. So the downside of that is you don't have public funding. You can't do the clinical trials you want. You can't do $50 million clinical trials when nobody can monetize them.
So if they can't make money on it, they're not going to do it.
They're not going to do the research.
So I'm going to have you hold that thought for one sec because we want to keep going. I'm going to open it up to questions. Pass it to Dr. Smith. Let me let you finish up that thought on supplements.
One brief comment that's helped me on understanding telomeres. You know, on your shoelaces, you've got little plastic tips on the shoelaces. That's the telomere on your DNA strand. And the more you walk, the more you use, the more you work on your DNA, you might say, thinner those things will get. So you've got to take really good care of them because you don't want short telomeres. You want to maintain that rectangular survival curve, and telomeres are important to do that, and that's lifestyle. It's many of the things that have just been mentioned.
So I'm going to point out two things, then we're going to go to exercise and mindfulness. And one thing is that I in preparing for these types of talks, right? These are big conversations, aren't they? This is a lot of high-level information. And a lot of it, guys, I'm going to tell you, I have asked multiple physicians over a period of time to speak on these kinds of things. And you know what they say? No, thank you. You know why? Because they're not going to spend the time with us to talk with us about these types of things. They're not. You go in and they want to be able to give you one prescription to go to the pharmacy and get. They do not want to try to help you find the 5 or 3 or 4 supplements that might actually help you. And I don't mean to be critical of the medical industry. I know they're under a lot of pressure and they're doing the best they can. But I'm telling you, my take on this when I started doing the research is that I have to be my own investigator. I've got to do the research and then ask my physician, what do you think about this? And then they'll give you an opinion, but they're not going to spend an hour with you going over this. Yeah.
You give the doctor the microphone when you don't know when to be quiet. But as Dr. Imes mentioned, the parameters we can use to determine our biological age. At Mercy, I still work for Mercy. Every year, I have to submit blood pressure, all kinds of dynamics that go into a program, and it comes back on my chronological and biological age. That affects what I'm required to do. If I've got a high chronological age, lower biological age, Or she calls me up, here's what you're going to do to straighten that out. So it is available. It's not like it's some esoteric thing.
Right, yeah. So you can get it done. Yeah. All right, so Dr. Powers, I'm going to shift over to you. You've been very patient as we talk about some of this medical stuff. You know, the supplements are one thing, the diet is one thing. I want you to speak to as our stage of life is such that we're retired. There's a lot of people in this room, the majority of the people in this room, just so y'all know our statistics in here, 52% of our audience is between ages 75 and 85, just so you know. And so we'll use that as our average in here for, we have about 150 people in here. So in that age range, give or take a few years, what do you say about exercise? What are they seeing out there that's working that you would want these people to know about?
Okay, I could speak a long time on this, so
I know you
cut me
could.
off
Yep.
when I need to stop. And will you put up the first slide?
Yes,
The first of my
happy to, yeah.
slides. So I will give you some exercise recommendations, but I am of the opinion that the best exercise that you can do at any age, including 75 to 85, is the one that you will do. So I will make some recommendations. I'm going to recommend resistance training. But if you won't go to the gym and you won't resistance train, it does you no good. But if you will go walk every day, and that's what works for you, that's what you should do. So you should find what you will do and do it. Some exercise, any exercise, is better than none. Now, we do have some general recommendations, and most of my recommendations that I make for people in later stages of life are the same as I would make for everyone, because it's never too early to start, and it's better to start early and not lose some of the things that we lose with aging than to wait. But I think the most important thing that we can do, if you can only do one thing, it is resistance training. Resistance training is important for maintaining not only the structure of our muscle, but the function of our muscle. It keeps us strong and powerful. Both strength and power are important as we age, and I can come back to that in a minute if anybody wants to. But also resistance training helps with a lot of those other risk factors for disease. It helps with glucose regulation, blood pressure, mental health outcomes. It is a powerful way to impact your health. So I highly recommend resistance training. Resistance training should also be of high intensity and high velocity. So the higher the intensity, that means the more weight you lift, the more benefit you will get. Also, high velocity is important because of that power component, but I'll come back to that. I don't want to get too far down on that. However, if you are new to resistance training, let me just say something real quickly. If you're hearing this and thinking, oh, I'm going to start this, do not start at a high intensity. Anyone who starts something new, I always say start low and slow, and the goal is to get to that high intensity or that more vigorous intensity as soon as you can. Whatever that is for you. So start low, but try to work up to that high intensity because the benefits are maximized.
So can I ask you a quick question? So trainers like Bruce and the ones that you all have that you recommend out of UCO, when they start somebody on resistance training, I noticed that one time I started and they gave me these little 3-pound weights. And I went, seriously? Really? Right? Like I was a little bit irritated because I thought, I can do more than that. But then she had me do it 12 more times. And then 12 more times, and then 12 more times. Yeah, it got a little harder. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. So it's always better when you're starting to do too little than too much. And so it is important. 3-pound weights are great. Now, if someone gives you 3 pounds weights because of your age, that's wrong. But if they give you 3-pound weights because you're just getting started, that's great, right? That way you can do a full workout and see how you feel. If you do those 3 sets of 12 and 3 pounds is a lot for you at the end of that, perfect. If it's too easy after you've done those 3 sets, it's time to go up. That's what I mean. You start low and you start going up as quickly as possible. So 3 pounds will be absolutely enough for some of us and absolutely too much for some of us and too little for most of us. But you want to start low and then quickly work up to what you can
To
do.
300, right? Which is what Dr.
If you can do it, yeah, sure. Some of us will never be able to do 300 pounds because we're all individuals, we're all different. And so I've never lifted 300 pounds and never will in my life, and that's okay because that's me. Some of you may be able to do that, and some of you may have been able to do that in your past. It should always be individual and never what someone else is doing.
What about the labyrinth? I want you to speak about that, and how does that involve exercise and mindfulness kind of combined, as I understand it, yeah?
Yeah, great. Thank you for that question. I was not prepared for it, but I can certainly answer it. So a labyrinth is a single meandering path, which means it is different than a maze. You don't have to make decisions in a labyrinth. So it's a path that you can walk, and all you have to do is focus on staying on the path. It is a form of mindfulness, meditation. Some people use it as a spiritual practice. At UCO, we really use it for stress management and for physical activity because you're walking when you do this. So you're moving through the labyrinth, getting some movement at the same time that you are mindful and present in this moment. And so you're getting the dual benefits of moving and mindfulness.
And they can come do that at UCO anytime, right?
Absolutely. We have 2 labyrinths on our campus. We have an outdoor labyrinth that is available 24/7. Catch me afterwards if you want me to give you directions for how to find it. That labyrinth is 1/3 of a mile. So if you come and you walk the labyrinth, it's in a small space, just a little bit bigger than this stage, maybe twice as big as this stage, and you can walk 1/3 of a mile and have a mindful experience.
Dr. Smith, you want to add to that?
I just want to add a note of caution. The individuals I see in our age group that start lifting over their head, above shoulder level, they start reaching and lifting and using a fair amount of weight. Remember, our tendons, as we're in our 70s, 80s, and 90s, are very fragile. The incidence of having a rotator cuff tear is very common. I see that a lot. A lot of arthritic changes in our neck. If we start tilting our head back, trying to lift things over shoulder level or above, you're going to have neck trouble. If you start doing a lot of weightlifting, pushing with your feet, you're going to have lower back trouble. Our spines are fragile, our tendons are fragile, so certainly I understand what Dr. Powers is saying, and I certainly respect and understand that and advocate that, but you do need a trainer, somebody that's showing you, and be very careful. If it hurts, stop. It's not going to get better.
Yes, thank you for that. If you're new to resistance training, I highly recommend that you work with a trainer to start, and a trainer that knows what they're doing. So ask your trainer some questions. Not everyone knows what they're doing. And this is also why you start low and slow and work up at your own pace. Exercise should never be painful. It should be hard, right? You should have to work at it, but it should never be painful. If something hurts, something is wrong.
You know what's interesting that just popped in my head as you guys are talking about this? So I told you next week I'm going to talk about downsizing, right? You know what I see people doing that have not done any resistance training over time? They decide to downsize and move. Dr. Smith, you moved a while back. You know what they start doing in their closet? Getting big boxes of books out of their closets and albums like this and trying to get them down. And guess where injuries happen? Right there, in the closet and in the garage. And people go, oh, I'm too old to do that. It's not about it's not an age, it's a lack of physical fitness, right? So if you haven't been doing those kind of things, then chances are an injury is more likely. Which is why I always say to people, this isn't about your age, we just want to help because we want to prevent injury. And so having a trainer, it's not about age, it's about preventing injury and doing it correctly, right? Okay, so you had something else you wanted to add about mindfulness before we move on to questions? Or did you cover it with the labyrinth? Okay, so I've gone long because these guys are so interesting. I just let them go because it's very interesting. But I know you have questions, so be thinking of your questions. And I'm going to ask each one of these guys to wrap up with anything that's still in their mind that I've asked them to think about, and then we're going to open it up to questions. Is there anything you want to put a bookmark on up here before I open it up for questions? No? You ready? Dr. Smith?
The enemy of good is better, so be very careful in how you exercise. And my other thought to leave you with, we don't want to outlive our brain or our teeth if we can avoid it. So I'll leave that with the parting comment.
Awesome. Yeah, and I'm going to just really quickly, so I don't forget, if you ever see where Dr. Smith is giving a talk on stroke prevention, what's the other one you do? Cardiovascular disease prevention? They go together. Please make it a point to go to one of those talks. He does those fairly frequently around the community. Okay, so we're going to open it up for questions. You'll ask, and I'll repeat it, and these guys will answer it. Okay? Yes, ma'am. Right here in the front. Okay, hang on. Let's start with one, and then I'm going to repeat it back so that they can hear it. Yeah, just so that we get them all. Okay? Okay. Okay. Good question. So she gets about 6 hours of sleep. She wants to know, is that sufficient? Does she need more? And if so, how could she do that?
You need more. It's this has been kind of an interesting subject over the years. You know, your mama told you need 7.5 8 hours of sleep when you were a kid. That turns out to be true. There's actually some work going back about 25 years now done by the Cancer Society, believe it or not, in a survey. What they found was people who sleep too little have an increased death rate. People who sleep too long have an increased death rate. So it's a U-shaped curve, and down at the bottom of that curve, the best time is still 7.5 to 8 hours. Now, if you cannot, for some reason, sleep, 7.5 or 8 hours, then get evaluated and see why. Because that can be due to medications, it can be due to sleep disorders. Lots of different things can result in poor sleep.
So let me just hang on before you go. I'm going to clarify. How many of you in the room have been to a sleep doctor and been evaluated by show of hands? Okay, not very many. I didn't really know what that would involve. And when we went, it was interesting. It wasn't just, hey, you're going to do a sleep study. It was, let me look at all your medications. Let me find out what your lifestyle factors are. Let me look at your lab work. And maybe we need to do a sleep study, okay? And I thought that was interesting. And so just as a funny side note, we went originally because I knew Chris needed a CPAP. I was confident he needed a CPAP because he snored like crazy. We were sleeping in separate rooms. We were ready to go see Dr. Imes because I needed him to sleep quieter. That's why we went. Guess what? I had worse sleep apnea than he did. Guess who ended up with a CPAP machine? Yes. So you don't know what you don't know until you go, and then I thought there was a racket. I'm like, okay, everybody gets a sleep machine. Everybody. Does everybody get a sleep machine?
No, but if you go to a sleep doctor, it means you've got a problem, so there's a pretty high chance.
Pretty high
It's like if you go in the
Yeah.
hospital ER and you've got pain around the lower quadrant, there's a pretty high chance you can get your appendix taken out.
Well, so just to your point, really quick on the sleep thing, I think this is important because we haven't done a seminar on this, you guys. The sleep thing, he said too little or too much. Chris does not sleep hardly at all. He has a terrible time sleeping. I can go to bed at 8 o'clock at night and sleep until noon the next day. Is that a good thing? Because I'm not getting good sleep. Do you guys get that? So that's why I say when he says too much or too little, we are kind of the opposite ends of the spectrum. And that can also create divorce, I'm just saying. Right? That's a whole different issue we won't talk about today. Okay, I need to get multiple questions out. So I'm going to go, if I can get back to you, I will. But I told the lady right back here that I would get hers. Yep, Jerry?
I wanted to know, where do you get your different organ, the test for all your...
Where can you find the tests about your organs and the biologic age of your organs? You guys mentioned them. Yeah.
I'd probably rather not talk about that. Let me talk to you afterwards. Because it's as far as I know, there's just one company that is trying to marry both the biologic age from the genetic changes, so-called methylation, and then they also look at the proteins produced by the organs. There's only one company I know of. The more things you look at, the higher the accuracy, though. And as I said, your worst organ is going to be your limiting factor. So you can have when you have a very badly diseased liver or heart or any other organ, that's going to be really what determines your life experience. So I'm glad to see they're doing it now.
But not everybody needs to run out and get the test.
I wouldn't, I wouldn't run out and get it just yet.
Dr. Smith?
I can add to that, at least for lipids, your LDL, when you go to the doctor and get your LDL checked, that's simply a gross look at what it's doing. If you can get your doctor to send your specimen to the Cleveland Heart Lab or the Mayo Heart Lab, they will fractionate, break that LDL down into fragments, and we found that there's certain fragments in the LDL that is the cause for heart disease and stroke. It's called LP(a). You can't do much about it, but it's good to know if you've got it, that you can keep your lifestyle as plant-based and freedom of things that hurt you and cause more methylation. Those are the things you look for. It's LP(a) within the fragment, but only a couple of labs in the country do it, as far as I know.
So you'd have to actually ask your doctor to send that to the
Yes, you tell me you want to send your specimen for a lipid profile or LDL profile.
Okay, yes, ma'am.
Instead of a CPAP, there's been an implant. How does that work?
Okay, so the difference between the CPAP and the marketing now of the implant that they're doing.
Yeah, the one that's commercially available right now is called Inspire. I have a little bit of ambivalence about it. If you choose people correctly, it works. But the problem is, I'm not sure they're choosing people correctly. It's been more of a, I don't want to be too derogatory. When they first came to town, they came to me to work with them, and I dropped it pretty quick because I was interested in good medicine. They were interested in selling devices.
There you go. That's why we call this the Truth Series. Yeah, right. Very good. Yeah.
But if you choose people correctly, it is a successful treatment. I mean, we now have people out there since the original trials were done that are in those original trials. People have been on the machine now for over 15 years, and they're still working. So if you choose them right, it does work for a long period of time, which is actually quite unusual in sleep medicine. That's why they've given up on doing surgeries on the upper airway, because those work for a week, 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years, and they don't work anymore. So almost all the upper airway surgeries have ceased being done.
Guys, you know what I've learned from talking with the physicians that really do want to talk to us is that, that there are people out there that are just trying to sell stuff, and then there are physicians who are trying to practice medicine, right? And there's a difference, and so that's what you're really looking for. Okay, I'm going to go way back there to Vicki in the back. You're going to have to yell, Vicki. Okay.
Talked about nutritional supplements.
Yes.
Where can we get information about beneficial as opposed to not beneficial nutrition?
Where do you go to find out about the beneficial supplements versus the not beneficial supplements?
No place as far as I know.
There is no one place.
You have to read about a couple hundred articles and draw your own impressions. Like I say, very, very few high-quality clinical trials are out there. There's some small trials, and that's kind of what I go by. I think the small human trials, some of them are convincing, others are not. But it's been one of those things, even in those smaller trials that have been done, a lot of times there's mixed signals. One study will show nothing, another study will show some benefit. Very hard to just determine. So I kind of go back to the original biochemistry that it's attacking in the body. What is it expected to make better? And then I try to use overlap. There's, like I say, there's 12 different reasons why you develop aging, but supplements sometimes do several of those things. Some of them are, several of them are anti-inflammatory. Well, inflammation is a common denominator among a lot of different causes for aging. So if you can make that better with a medication or a supplement, it usually, I think, has benefit. I think we can show that. Certain things have been studied, but almost no high-quality clinical trials.
So it also, I'm going to ask if maybe this is a little different spin on that same question, and I think Dr. Smith, you and I talked about this. When we talk about supplements, there are supplements that are obscure. We don't really know much about them. And then there are supplements like magnesium and DHEA and the things that some of us need to take because we're deficient in that. How do we know if we're getting a quality supplement like that over the counter that we just go pick up because the doctor says we need it?
Generally, you have to rely on some kind of testing agency, and most of the time in the United States, we use USP. I think you have another one don't you?
Yeah, I use Consumer Labs.
Yeah, but there are credible laboratories that test these substances. I would be, my suggestion is don't buy anything that is manufactured overseas. So be sure it's manufactured in the United States. Once it's manufactured in India or China or something like that, all bets are off. You don't know what you're getting, and it may not even be safe.
Perfect. Dr. Smith?
That's especially important for anesthesia and surgery. If you need something done surgically, anesthesia is going to ask you, what supplements do you take? They'll want the whole list because some of them had adverse effects like anticoagulation, various cardiac complications, so you have to be very careful with them.
So let me just ask the question, Prevagen. Prevagen, yes or no? What do you think? Come on. You're the brain doc.
I've seen no credible evidence that would suggest Prevagen is beneficial. That's my opinion. That's my research that I've done from NYU Langone Medical Center in New York, some other Columbia Medical Centers, places like that. But I know my opinion is simply something I've formed. The other thing is, if you've got a hammer, everything looks like a nail, so you've got to be really careful.
That's correct. Yeah, that's true.
I agree 100%.
100%. Okay, good. All right, so yes, sir, right here. Yeah, you missed January's seminar, didn't you? Yes, or no? Okay. So he's asking, what are these stages that we're referring to, stages of life? So just really quickly, those of you who may be new to that conversation, we talked about how age is age, right? Not everybody retires at 65, right? And so somebody may be in a transition stage of life, they may be in a retirement stage of life, they may be in a caregiving stage of life. If you will circle back with me, matter of fact, Danielle, well, let's put in the follow-up letter to everybody, let's put the stages in there so that you can be caught up if you missed the January seminar, okay? Yeah, you got it. Okay, yes?
Could you give us your thoughts on these miracle weight loss drugs now, like Ozempic?
Okay, so thoughts on the weight loss drugs like Ozempic, Mounjaro, those that are out there now.
They were miracle drugs.
How so?
They work. Their side effect profile is very low. I wouldn't say everybody, one, tolerates it, or two, has a good result. What we know is that when you go on, say, for example, Ozempic, you're getting one medicine. When you're on Mounjaro, there's actually another medicine added to that. So the weight loss that one gets is about 5% better if you take the Mounjaro as opposed to the Ozempic. Do they work? Yeah, they're actually normal body constituents. I mean, they're not foreign materials. They're what your body makes. It's just getting a bigger dose and a timely dose. But yes, they tend to be very effective, and really, if you stick to the other things we're talking about here today, they're spectacular. But a few people, when for one reason or another, for example, if you have any kind of gastroparesis where your stomach does not work well, you may have trouble with it. Maybe you can't use it at all, and you always have to build the dosage up slowly. That's the other thing I see patients make a mistake with, is they want to get to the maximum dose real quick, and so then they get sick of their stomach. So then they've got an adverse reaction. If you back the dose down, you're typically okay, you kind of start all over. But it may take you 6 months to get your dose up. There's no hurry. And most of the time, if you're doing these other things we're talking about, you'll be losing weight from day one.
So it's about losing the weight, but it's also about maintaining the healthy lifestyle habits. Did you want to add to that, Melissa?
Yeah,
Yes.
I have a personal opinion that once you get your weight down to normal weight, I'm talking about losing 15 or 20 pounds, getting it down to that BMI 25, 26, once you get it down there, I think your metabolism changes. I think that even if you stop the drug, you'll still keep your weight down. If you stop before you get there, people have a tendency to rebound, just like in bariatric surgery, and the weight goes back up again.
Dr. Powers?
I would just add that with these drugs and any other form of weight loss, exercise needs to be part of that, because when we lose weight, we don't just lose fat, we lose muscle tissue, and if you already have a low amount of muscle mass and you're losing more, that could put you at risk for more things.
Yeah, and I think the key there, I've again done some research on this because Chris and I both utilized the Mounjaro, and I don't mind saying that. We both had great success with it, and we both kept the weight off because We're following the advice of people who are saying, if you're going to do this, you have to remember these other things. So it's not just doing a medication and a magic pill, it's all the things. And we're not perfect. I had a cookie the other day, oh my gosh, and I didn't even want the whole cookie. It was the weirdest thing, and usually I want 3 cookies, right? But it was something in my brain, because I've changed my lifestyle. It was like, oh, I want that cookie, and then I went, no, I really don't, right? Because I
That's not a Girl Scout cookie.
It was not a Girl Scout cookie. I'm not even going to tempt myself. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do, because it is time. I know I still see hands up, and there's always going to be hands up. These guys are going to go right over here to these tables, and they're going to be here for a bit. Now, here's my request, okay? Please, please, please. They are not your personal physicians today. They're here to ask you to ask general questions, information. If you need medical advice for yourself, you need to schedule an appointment with their office to do that. Melissa has, when we did our talk last month, her department out at UCO can recommend trainers. Am I misspeaking? Please. Okay, gosh. Oh, she's like, oh gosh, Nikki, don't tell everybody to call me. You guys can get their information. And Dr. Imes is still practicing, obviously. His clinic information is over there. You could visit with him in his clinic. Dr. Smith is not necessarily practicing day-to-day medicine, but can connect you with the right people should you need the services that you talk to him about. Okay, is everybody clear on what you can ask and what you can't? Do not ask them, what is this on my arm and should I have it seen? Right, that's just never a good thing. All right.